I am joined now by one of Ireland's foremost actors, Stephen Rea. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Very welcome.
How are you?
Happy Nulloch Naman.
Oh, good morning.
Let me, next week you are back treading the boards as part of Landmark's big 20th anniversary. They're back at the project where it all began. But you are starring in Crap's Last Tape, which was written obviously by a friend of yours, or certainly someone you got to work with, Samuel Beckett. Before we get into it, remind us a little bit what Crap's Last Tape is all about.
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say I was starring in it because I'm the only actor in it. And so I can't help but be centre stage, you know. But it's about a man who makes a tape every birthday. He's a writer, but he makes tapes every birthday and listens to the next birthday and to assess where his life is going. And it's in the title. He's making his last tape this time.
Was there an inevitability about you playing this role? Like, it's an iconic role, but did you think at some point you would get to play it?
Well, you know, he does listen to these old tapes, and I decided some years ago to make the tapes earlier. You know, so 12 years ago I did all the early tapes rather than do them 2 weeks before the show. So I was obviously imagining that one day I would do it, but somebody has to ask you.
So you hadn't recorded it for any production company or for anyone else. This is just something you did for yourself.
Yes, just put it in the top drawer and then forget about it. I actually lost the tape when I lost the CD. Had to get them back from the person that recorded them.
And then that must have been amazing for Anne Clark and Landmark did they know that when they asked you that you had sort of gone and done this for yourself anyway?
Well, I wasn't. Yeah, I said, oh, by the way, Anne, I have the tape. They have the earlier tapes, and I think she was. I think she thought that was a good idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what was going through your mind when you made those tapes back, whatever it was, 12 years ago? Like, were you drawn to the text?
Oh, listen, it's the most incredible text, and so I was, and I'm blown away when I listen to it now. Not because of what I'm doing with it, just the structure of it, the rhythm of it, the music of it. It's fantastic. And
also, it was just so wonderful to be able to do that because, as you say, the whole play is about, I suppose, even a conversation with a younger version of yourself.
That's right, yeah.
How do you feel, about taking on the role? There have been so many iconic actors that have done it. Patrick Magee, John Hurt, Barry McGovern, Michael Gambon. Did you get to see any of those versions, or how do you feel about?
I've seen on film McGee, but you know, I did the Endgame with McGee, so he's a special friend of mine and a special hero. So yeah, I'd be nervous. I would be nervous about that, and then I saw years ago the great English comedian Max Wall do it, and something about Max was so right for Beckett, you know. Because that humour, Beckett loved that music hall humour, and
kind of quite vaudeville type.
You can't get too obsessed with what other people do, you know, because you have to find your own way.
Talk to me about meeting Beckett and getting to work with him, because that must have been incredible for you to do that. Was that with Endgame?
Well, it was incredible. He's the most. He has a very firm intelligence about his own work. He knows what it should be, and sometimes directors don't know what it should be. But in this case, Vicky knows absolutely what it is. But no, it was incredible to be in his company and to hear his wisdom on the work that we were doing. You know, and And of course, McGee, Crapp's last tape was written for McGee. So he was familiar with him for a very long time, you know.
Bring us back to Endgame, because that's when you worked. You were quite young at the time. I don't think
I was, yeah.
You don't think you turned.
I'm still quite young.
You are still quite young, and we'll get there. But I think you got that role when you were 29. The role of Clove, but it was kind of sometimes the way that things go in life. It was actually because of the death of another great actor.
Yeah. Oh, listen, yeah, Jack McGarren, one of the greatest. He gave me my first job in London in Shot of a Gunman, and I adored him, you know, and I adored his work, and so it was tragic when he died very young, you know, really. But and Beckett loved him too, absolutely loved him. I think Jack was his favourite actor, and. And Jack said that working with Beckett transformed him as an actor from being just a regular character actor to being someone who understood the importance of theatre, you know, and with McGee the same thing is true, and with Mary Keane I always put those three together. That you know, I wish more younger people would have a look at their work, because they transformed Irish character acting. You know, they made it of an intelligence that had previously had been ignored. You know.
Were you intimidated having Beckett in the rehearsal room at the time, or you know, was that a transformative experience in and of itself, having been able to chat to him about his work, which so many people have spent years and decades and theses trying to understand and work out?
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I mean, listen, his work is very prone to misinterpretation or overinterpretation. You know, you know, have often quoted him as I asked him once about the meaning of a particular line, and he said, "Don't think about meaning, think about rhythm." And that's, I think, I'm saying that so if there's any actors listening, that's the key to acting. And another one, Clove, has to keep saying, "I leave you, I leave you." I said to him, when he says it on this particular occasion, is he going to the kitchen or is he going to for good? And Beckett said, "It is always ambiguous."
Yes, and
that is majestic. And in terms of modern acting and modern theatre, it's not about some intense intention necessarily. It may be about confusion, you know.
And of course, that's a big theme that goes through his work.
Yeah.
You've worked with some of, you know, the great playwrights and directors. You know, you think of Pinter, Sam Shepard, Beckett, of course, Tom Stoppard. Was there a kind of common thread between working with them, or did they bring out something different in you as a developing actor?
Well, I mean, you mentioned Sam Shepard and Harold Pinter. Of course, they were deeply influenced by Beckett. His writing changed their writing, or informed it from the word go, as with Sam. You know, so there were. You know, as I said to Sam, I've worked with Beckett. You know, and his jaw dropped. You know, because he couldn't anymore work with him because he wasn't around anymore. But they were huge, and actually Sam Shepard and Pinter were both actors, so they were heaven to work with, you know.
It is extraordinary, and to not just have met them but to have worked with them. Can I bring you back to Crapp's last tape? So much as with Beckett in one act, but it's identity, it's reflection, it's looking back, it's looking at the losses you rack up in life, the failures, the successes. It's and particularly with Crap, the relationship with love. And I'm just wondering, what do you make now of the younger Stephen Rea, of the life that you have led? Like, I mean, is doing this work forcing you to look back and at the various tapes in your life?
Oh, I just feel very lucky that I was allowed to do the job that I wanted to do, you know, and really any development in my life has always been in relation to the people that you mentioned I've worked with. I always had a determination to work with the best writers, you know. So I succeeded in that in some sense. You know, my first experience of theatre was really sitting in my own room in Belfast reading all the plays that I could find, you know, and then eventually Friel and I formed a company together, which had some significance, I believe, in.
Well, I think more than just a significance, because you know, when you recall that field day in itself was a cultural and sort of an intellectual response to the political crisis in you know, in the north at that time, and I think it had an incredible impact that still resonates today. Was that the intention at the time when, you know, you and Brian came together to produce this type of theatre?
Well, we started with the idea, let's just do a play, you know, and the play happened to be Translations, which is one of the greatest Irish plays written.
Of all time.
Yeah. And then we brought in, as our board of directors, we brought in Seamus Heaney, Seamus Dean, Tom Paulin, David Hammond, and eventually Tom Kilroy. So we had very serious intellects around us, and so that started to take us even further, really, you know, and we managed to get some really wonderful plays from people, and it had a huge impact. I know that because there was a way of expressing things that wasn't just about anger. It was about an exploration of what the losses had been and how we should look to recovering the losses. You know.
And when you think, you know, Stephen, back to that time, you know, we're both from the north. I remember touring the amateur drama circles much later on in the late 80s and 90s as a young student with those plays. And, you know, even at that time before the peace process, you know, the notion of travelling around doing plays and vans and, you know, lifting sets and everything was tricky enough even at that time. But for the 80s to be doing that in the early 80s and travelling around the island with plays that were really challenging the big issues of that time. Did you ever have a sense of that, the risk that you're, I suppose, taking in bringing these plays to communities, particularly when you're going to, you know, the Guildhall in Derry or elsewhere? Did you ever fear the reactions that theatre would bring?
No, my only sense of danger would be that if people didn't turn up. Yeah. But, you know, people turned up everywhere because they knew it was about them, because we had gone into their homeland and said, we're going to do this play. And they just, right, well, we better, if you're going to do it, we'd better be there. So that, it was a fantastic response from an audience that didn't want to travel to Dublin to see it, or, you know, wanted it in their own parish hall. So it was a fantastic dialogue between the audience and the company, and better than anything I've ever experienced. Yeah.
When you look back now, or even at the time, did you think what you were doing, what you were all doing, and all of those greats, Tom and everyone included, and obviously Tom passed away recently, were you thinking, this is courageous what we're doing with Field Day?
I think theatre is always courageous because it's got potential failure written all over it, and making it work and giving it your all is very requires a lot of effort, you know. And but when you're doing it, you know, if you see a production of Translations now, you realise just what a magnificent play it is, you know, and
how timeless it is.
Yeah.
And how timeless.
And then recently, you know, the Ukrainian company came here. I've ever seen.
The night I
just what a magnificent play it is, you know, and
how timeless it is.
Yeah.
And how timeless.
And
it
then
is.
recently, you know, the Ukrainian
I-
company came here and performed, and it was absolutely the most exciting production I've ever seen.
The night I saw it, there were tears. People
Yeah.
were just on their feet, but there were tears seeing how translation had translated across to
Yeah, and
to
they
that
were
conflict.
living it, you know.
Yeah.
They were
It was
not pretending to be somebody that hadn't experienced it. They were living it.
It was incredible. I felt so lucky to have got to see it. Can I talk to you about, if Field Day now, like, I mean, there's so much talk now of a united or a shared island where, as an island, we're really once again exploring identity and these big issues. How would Field Day, or how does the arts respond to that conversation?
Well, I mean, I'm working with a great man from the north called Peter Doran, who wants to do something about the indigenous world all over the world, you know, how they were subverted, how their understanding of the world was subverted by imperialism, you know. And that, of course, applies to here big time. And I hope that we'll get doing some stuff in the near future, you know.
Yeah, and even that remarkable piece you did with Claire Dwyer Hogg, actually, on that short film you did with Claire on Brexit was fantastic as well. Can I ask you about, you know, the world we're in? We hear a lot about wokeism or a cancel culture, or that, you know, everything's very binary and you can get shut down for saying or expressing anything. I think back to The Crying Game, that amazing film, and the premise of it. You know, an IRA man who inadvertently falls in love with a transgender woman. Do you think that film could be made now, would be made now? Were you know, what was your kind of consciousness of that, you know, controversy when you were making it back at a time where we were still just, I think in 92, we still criminalised sexual behaviour between gay men?
I know. Well, Neil says he couldn't make that film now because that has been met, that issue. But yeah, at the time it was incredible. And I mean, wonderful. And I remember when it was first on in New York, I was in New York and I'm walking down Fifth Avenue and there's a gay pride parade coming along, and they saw me and started chanting my name. And it was like unbelievable, you know, the impact. It was such warmth they felt, you know, and it's a truly great film, I believe, you know, and the best moment in it is, to me, and when my character says, "Look, I can't stay in this relationship any longer." He says, "Why not?" And he says, "You're a man." And she says, "Okay, well, before you go, kiss me." And he kisses her, and he realizes he can't leave. That's an extraordinary way of dramatizing what the whole issue of bisexuality is and all that, you know.
And that was way, way before its time. You've talked about that recognition, and look, you've worked with a lot of the greats. You've become one of the greats. Does celebrity or recognition sit easily with you?
No, it doesn't. I don't care for it, really. People in this country, in this town, are very, you know, they just greet you and say, "Hey, how you doing?" And, but I'm not comfortable with fame, you know. No.
But it's part of the.
No, I suppose it'd be worse to be ignored, wouldn't it? I don't know.
It probably would. When you look back at particularly your film work, what would you rate as your greatest film work in your own
I think
view?
The Crying Game is
Yeah.
the best film that I've been in. I saw it again recently. They've had a new print of it, and I said to Neil, it's a masterpiece, you know, because on every level it works, and it deals with everything, all of the issues that we've all lived with. But Neil pretty much does great work, you know. And Michael Collins was very important work here about, because it was an Irish film, it wasn't a Hollywood film, it was about the people who live here. So that's what I mostly. I'm sure I've been in something else good.
You've been in a lot of great things. And actually, I was just wondering now, you know, when you look at your incredible portfolio across film, you know, stage, TV, do you have a preference for any of the, you know, do you have a preference for stage or film, or do you like having that variety of work?
No, well, I do like film, you know. I like it, yeah, I do. I love it actually, but and theatre is very, very demanding indeed. You know, 8 shows a week. Got to get it right every night. You know, it's tough. You know.
Can I ask you about, again, sort of bringing us back home, but to the art scene in Northern Ireland? You know, here in the Republic, we've got, you know, the prospect of a basic pilot income scheme for the arts, but the status at home in the North is creating very, very challenging circumstances for those who are trying to make their way and do the kind of work perhaps that you were doing way back in the 80s with Field Day.
I know. You see, Friel and I were lucky because we got money from the Northern Arts Council, and then we asked the Dublin Arts Council. They were more than keen to have us tour and do all that. So I don't know what people do now. You know, I think theatre's in a bit of disorder. It's certainly in disorder in Britain. Mm-hmm. But I'm very keen on what I mean. There are sources of great work here, you know. I mean, Katrina McLaughlin is really something, you know, and so of course is Anne Clark, and then the Gate is doing very interesting work. I mean, we've got Hugo Weaving coming there shortly, and I've worked with him a couple of times, and he's really something, you know.
Can I ask you about, because Craps last tape, the rehearsals were split to accommodate your trip to Somalia recently as a UNICEF ambassador. What was it like heading out there? Obviously, the world is in a very, very challenging place right now.
Oh, it couldn't be worse, really. It's very distressing to go to Somalia and see malnutrition and famine and the terrible climate change issues. You know that. You know they have drought, and the land hardens up, and then when the rain comes, the rain doesn't go away. It sits on the land, and one of the most disturbing things I saw was a woman she had about 5 children, and she'd walked for 2 weeks to get to this camp, and she was she was breastfeeding her youngest child, but she hadn't eaten herself in days, so there was nothing for the child to feed on. Now, with UNICEF there, they were able to try and do something about that, but that is one of the most imponderable cruelties that you could imagine, that a woman who loves her child can't feed it. I can't. It's horrific, and so UNICEF does do incredible work, you know, on the ground there, and here, it's the biggest charity there is for children.
And the struggles for children. We just. You know, we've now surpassed, I think, 4,000 children in homeless accommodation. It's a challenge even on our own island. Can I
just say that about this, what it makes me very, very ill about the whole homelessness thing. Mm-hmm. When I hear government people using terms like eviction or landlord, those are terms from a time of oppression in this country, when people were put out of their homes, evicted. And I think they should start using different language. Yeah,
because it obviously
a home is a right, And it's time they acknowledged it as that.
Where is home for you, Stephen Rea, right now?
Well, I live out in a place called Ballymadrock, North County Dublin, with my 2 sons, and we go to Donegal as often as we can.
I know in the past you've said that your 2 boys have brought intense happiness to your life, and I know you were planting native oak trees together during the pandemic. How are they doing?
They're doing great.
The trees and the boys.
They're doing great. They really are. All of them are doing great. The trees and the boys. Yeah, they're marvelous. You know.
Yeah. Can I ask you just about the state, because when you're doing Craps Last Tape, you're nowhere near the last tape, but you're probably at a stage of life when you're reflecting back, and you teased us a couple of years ago with the prospect of a memoir. How's that going for you?
I forget. No, I don't know. Yeah, I'm supposed to be doing it, and I'm being pressed to do it and everything, and but like I said, I'm a kind of very private person. I don't really.
But what would be the deal then for a memoir? Like, I mean, are you thinking back to your own parents and the life that they led? Growing up in the time that you did. What?
Well, I have a very different life to they had. I mean, there's no question. But I would just really like to write about the impact of art, film on the audiences, and how important it has been here. I mean, I look at the Abbey. My remark about the Abbey is that we had a national theatre before there was a nation, and that's how extraordinary the work of an artist can be. And so I'd like to maybe investigate that a bit.
Is the challenge of a memoir, because obviously it's an edited project, you're self-editing, you're self-censoring, choosing what goes in and what goes out. When you reflect back, what do you want to encompass in all of that? Because, sometimes we read memoirs, it might be out of prurience, it might be out of interest, it might be anything at all. But being such a private person, would you feel obliged to go into areas of your life that you perhaps don't want to share?
Well, I wouldn't do it. Well, I just couldn't. I don't like nosy Parkers either. I'm sorry. I'm not the right man to have a memoir.
It's incredible. We're even for Landmark, actually, 20 years they're going to be celebrating back in the project, and tickets are selling out very, very fast. Are you looking forward to the run, Stephen Rea?
Well, I have no choice. I'm lined up to do it. Listen, I think it's a great play, and I think we've found some very interesting ways to do it, which I haven't seen in all the versions that I've seen. So, and it's great that Beckett is still a significant writer.
Yeah.
I mean, he transformed 20th century theatre, really.
Yeah, and for you, just before I let you go, just a lot of support for you, Stephen. Why do we not have people like Stephen Rea running the country with his compassion, his empathy and his wisdom? Can you imagine what a wonderful place to be? That was from Connie. Another texter says Stephen is a legend. And finally, Fiona says, Dearbhail, it's so lovely to hear Stephen on the radio. I'm a big fan of his work. He's a fabulous ambassador for the Irish around the world with his work, and it has been, Stephen, an absolute joy to have you with us in studio this morning. We wish you all the best with Craps Last Tape, and do write that memoir. It would be a good one.
Thank you very much.
All the best.